Star Wars' Battlefront 2 controversy is one that could have a significant impact on the whole gaming industry going forward because there's quite a few games these days, especially on the mobile scene, that use a loot box system or something similar, which is in effect a gambling system. And if governments, if politicians, if the gaming industry starts taking action and starts moving away from the loot box system, that's going to have a fairly significant impact on the whole industry. But obviously in this video I want to talk specifically about the title Battlefront 2 and about the issues and the controversy that it is facing and why it's facing such controversy. Obviously, if this wasn't Star Wars, I don't think it would have been as big of a deal. But Star Wars, especially with a new Star Wars movie coming out very soon, has a lot of eyeballs on it. So that's, in my opinion, why it got as big as it did. In part, why it got as big as it did. In other parts, it's because of decisions that the developers, publishers made, like EA, Disney, DICE, decisions they all made that contributed to this entire situation. But before I dive into that, I want to talk about some other issues that this game has that have been overshadowed by the whole controversy surrounding the loot boxes in this game. So the first issue is with the graphics and the gameplay. I mean, it's related. It's related because you don't have destruction, which is obviously a graphics issue, and a gameplay issue at the same time. I mean, the game runs very well. It's very well optimized, more optimized than any title that they've released on this engine. But the cost is that you don't have destruction. You don't have that dynamic destruction as in the Battlefield games. I get that the previous game didn't have that either, but the previous game isn't really an example, a shining example of a game. It did fairly poorly. I mean, it did have its moments, sure, with some of the DLC, but overall, the Battlefield games, Battlefield 4 in its current state, Battlefield 1, they're just much better games. They're more impressive games, so not having destruction is a big deal. It makes the matches far less interesting than they should be. Certainly you have things like heroes spicing things up, ability cards and all of that do change the dynamic of things, but just being able to completely change the whole level, being able to blow a hole through a very significant chunk of a level is a big deal. Not having that makes it less interesting to play. On top of that, it's much smaller scale than say the Battlefield games. We have the largest scale battle, and this one is 40 man. So that performance, with the increased performance we get in this title comes from that. We have less people than in the Battlefield games. And the Starfighter, the space battles, they're only 24 people, and then it gets smaller and smaller depending on the game mode you're playing. So there's always a cost, and I think they could have made it a lot more interesting. Now, some people say, well, they're obviously making it an arcade shooter. They're aiming it for kids. You know what kids used to play when I was young? Serious Sam, Doom, Doom before that, Wolfenstein. I mean, they're not necessarily complex games, but they're more complex than this. They have a lot more on offer than this. I mean, kids don't necessarily need to have their handheld and be treated like retards, to make a point here. In fact, kids can probably handle something like Battlefield 1 quite well in terms of complexity, or even more complex. I would certainly like a more complex game, a larger scale game. I kind of feel one of the point about these games, the Battlefront series, the Battlefield series, is you should go larger and larger scale. And they've made the conscious decision to go smaller scale, which I think is a shame, and it's one of my biggest disappointments actually with this title. No destruction, smaller scale. Those are two of my issues. The biggest issue I actually have with this title, personal issue, and one of the biggest problems with this game is with the campaign. The campaign just isn't interesting. It's boring. It doesn't offer an interesting story. It doesn't offer interesting characters. And that's really a disappointment. You look back at the reveal trailer. Look at the reveal trailer. You will see a marketing campaign that they engaged in that, oh, you're going to play on the Empire side. You're going to see their perspective. In the reveal trailer, EA created a bunch of scenes, did voice and motion capture for that trailer, developed significant scenes that do not happen in the actual game. And that was, what, 7 months ago that they released the reveal trailer for this game? I'm very much inclined to believe that they were forced into altering significant chunks of the story by Disney. Just like Disney, I guess, forced the makers of Rogue One to significantly alter that movie for the better, but in this case, probably for the worse. I mean, what's shocking to me isn't that the game is crap. I mean, I don't necessarily expect EA and DICE to create good single-player experiences for their shooters. I mean, it's disappointing when, Battlefield 1 was somewhat okay. It had some good moments even. And maybe I would have liked to see more of that in this title, but we don't. It's worse, far worse than Battlefield 1 as a campaign. It just feels like things that they wanted to check off a list. So it's a checklist of things, Luke mission, Leia mission, Kylo Ren, because of course the emo bitch boy has to show up and ruin everything. Though he's not actually that bad in this one, like Force Awakens. But there's just a bunch of things, that just feels there, oh, we have to have this in there, as opposed to having a story and a campaign focus on a character and the journey of that character. Looking back at the reveal trailer, you have Iden narrating, saying that she's waited 30 years for this, that she remembers her last orders, that the real war began after Endor. And one would have expected the campaign to be focused on her journey, her path, and her getting from point A to point B. And from point A, Special Forces at Endor. Point B, the New Order. Seeing the collapse of the Empire, all of that. We don't get that. We don't get any of that. She joins the rebellion fairly early on in the campaign. And the entire story is just garbage and boring and not interesting at all. It's not going to be a memorable title. In fact, I feel that without the entire controversy surrounding the loot box system, this game would just be a completely forgettable experience several years down the line, just like the previous one was. So, I mean, the loot box system controversy has made it famous or infamous, but still, it's not a good title. And what's really shocking to me is looking at the people that developed the story. They're not incompetent. They're not fools. They're not people that have made bad stories. I mean, Walt Williams was one of the principal writers of this story. And he was also one of the writers for Mafia 2 and the narrative designer of Spec Ops: The Line. And Spec Ops: The Line is a particularly great example to use in comparison to Battlefront 2 because like Battlefront 2, it's a third-person game, mainly third-person. You can play first-person, sure, but you're mainly going to play third-person, right? Third-person shooter experience, not very long, not very interesting in terms of its campaign gameplay, but Spec Ops: The Line has this focused story on this character and the descent into madness for this character as he experiences the horrors of war and completely loses his mind. It's an exceptionally good story that saved that game from being a mediocre pile of trash. I mean, it didn't do well financially. That's because its multiplayer was pretty terrible. But single player wise, it was certainly one of the most memorable experiences in gaming for anyone that's played it. So looking at someone like that wrote something like that was responsible for the narrative of a game like that, to produce Battlefront 2, and looking at the reveal trailer of this game, you just get the feeling that someone along the corporate lines, either EA or more likely Disney, because they've had a hand in other decisions, forced them to change things in a certain way. And look, I don't really like a lot of the things that Disney has done with the IP ever since they've gotten it. I'm not such a fan of the expanded universe. I understand that a lot of the expanded universe was quite frankly garbage, but Force Awakens is also garbage. It has a shitty story. It doesn't really have anything memorable or good. In fact, it pisses me off because they kill Han Solo in a really pathetic way. That's why I hate Force Awakens. I mean, otherwise I just say it's mediocre, but they kill the best character in Star Wars, who was arguably the main character in the original movies. I mean, you look at the original movies, it's really Han Solo's story. He goes through the biggest journey, the biggest transformation. He's the most interesting character throughout that. I mean, yeah, Luke, Vader, the Emperor, all that, it's important and interesting, but it's really about Han Solo and his journey. He's the one we can relate to the most, and just having him killed off like that by Kylo Ren is just infuriating. That's why I hate Force Awakens. Rogue One, yeah, it's a good movie, but it's not a good movie because it has interesting characters. I mean, I like the droid, and the Admiral, that's kind of about it. Otherwise, don't really care. It doesn't really matter story-wise, character-wise, but you have a movie That's a war movie. That a large part of it is focused on a battle, and that battle is very well done. I mean, hell, the hallway scene in Rogue One. I mean, maybe this is the design philosophy surrounding a lot of these hero missions, right? That, oh, the hallway scene, it was very nice and short and people loved it. Let's replicate that in this game by having these missions focused on this character. But the hallway scene is not great because it's Vader. The hallway scene is great because it's about the rebels. And you have that... You just have the entire Imperial versus Rebel struggle within that entire scene. Everything condensed in that entire scene. That's why it's art. This inhuman, unstoppable, incomprehensible force against these group of rebels. They know they can't win. They have no chance. They still stand and fight, horrified, pissing their pants, shitting themselves in terror, and yet they still stand and fight. They still fight the darkness as is. That's why the hallway scene is Rogue One. That scene alone, and I'm not really doing it justice with my commentary here, but it's really a work of art. And that's one of the big reasons Rogue One is a great movie for Star Wars. I mean, it's not a great movie because of the characters or the overall story. It's a great movie because of things like that, or just the battle between Rebels and Empire, which is very well done. It's small scale enough, proper scale enough, authentic enough. There's a lot of things to like there. And imagine if Battlefront 2 was like that. Imagine if Battlefront 2 was like Spec Ops: The Line in terms of story quality, or whatever. Instead, we get this redemption story, and it's not really interesting. And occasionally we play a hero. Now, what about the loot box system and the gigantic controversy surrounding that system? Well, I am personally of the belief that it would not have gotten as big as it did if not for the fact that they were asking people to farm tens of thousands of credits to unlock Darth Vader or Luke or Leia. These are big names. They're important for a lot of people. When you play a Star Wars game that has them, you want to play those heroes. That's just how it works. The fact that they were locked behind the credit wall was just infuriating. And mind you can't actually get all that much credits from the loot boxes. You actually have to grind it. So that pissed a lot of people off. And that brought attention to a lot of the other things. Forcing Electronic Arts to actually remove the system completely before the game was officially on. So it was people with early access, people with beta access, all that really took notice of how the system is. And just forcing Electronic Arts into a particular situation where they had to remove it. And I've heard that Disney was not particularly thrilled about the controversy surrounding Vader in particular, or Luke or Leia or any of that, and they just basically told Electronic Arts, force their hand. So whether or not they add the loot box system in it again, where you can buy loot boxes for money, remains to be seen. But for now, they have removed it. It removed the ability to purchase it for real world money at the moment. That means you can, the only way to get loot boxes is obviously to spend credits, but you still have to unlock those heroes. Look, having a loot box system, the principle behind the loot box system is reasonable. You have a loot box system that people can spend real money on, and they get in certain things, certain items, certain customization things, certain customization options. And in exchange, we get all the content that gets developed post-launch for free. The problem is this. Heroes should not require credit. It's just infuriating. Look at Overwatch. Any hero that gets added, any map that gets added in the game, any piece of content that's not, that's just not cosmetic, you get, right? You just get off the bat. It's all cosmetic. Everything else, you get it. You don't have to grind for it. A new hero gets added, you can play him the instant he's released or she's released. That's the Overwatch system. It's considerably better as a system than this piece of garbage, where you have to spend a significant amount of hours grinding for this, and then spend the currency on these heroes. That's one of the problems, and I think that's one of the main reasons people are angered. But that's just the most visible aspect about it, obviously. The real problem is that it's a pay-to-win mechanic. Why is that? Well, the star card system. Each class, be it the 4 infantry classes, each individual hero, or the space fighter classes, and some of the special vehicles that you can get access to in maps, each of them has up to 3 star card slot. You start with 1, you get more at specific levels, 5 and 10 on that particular character. So you need to level up each individual character or class to that level to get more star card slots. But what about the star cards themselves? You have 2 options. You can craft them yourselves using crafted parts, which is a currency you can earn either by doing challenges or getting them from loot boxes. So either you get them from loot boxes or you craft them yourself, or you can get the star cards through the loot boxes themselves. Here's the thing though with crafting them, that when it comes to the idea of crafting them, and you can certainly earn a good amount of crafting parts by doing challenges, completing a campaign, doing collectibles, arcade, etc. So it's not too hard to get at least the lower level stuff. The higher level stuff I think is too unreasonable, too expensive. When it comes to crafting parts, you would need a significant amount. But that's because the way the system is designed, the crafting parts affair is more so if you're just in that situation where you want the card, you're not getting it from the loot boxes, and you just really want it. The main way it seems to me that you're supposed to get these star cards is through actually the loot box system. And you do get daily loot boxes, you do get a few loot boxes for specific challenges, and there's pre-order bonus, special edition, all that you get some. But mainly you have to buy loot boxes for credits. So not only do they want you to farm a lot of credits, tens of thousands, even with the reduction in cost for heroes, you still have to farm tens of thousands of credits for these heroes. You also have to farm a significant amount of credits to get these star cards. But here's the problem. Whereas with the crafted parts, you can only you are limited in terms of the quality of the star cards you can craft by the level of your character or of your class and your overall account level. So you need level 7, level 15, and so on and so forth to get the higher level stuff. But the loot boxes ignore that. You can get high level, very high level cards from the loot boxes. That's pay to win. The entire system as designed, even if they have removed the ability of people to buy these for real money, was designed as pay to win. That's the real controversy. Now, Vader, eventually it's not really that difficult to get one hero, but it's just really this idea that you can get these high level cards very easily if you just spend the money for it. Or you can farm for dozens of hours to get characters to the high enough level. And as I said, individual heroes have their own star cards, and the abilities that people get through these star cards are significant. It's a very significant advantage. Grenade, blast radius, rate of fire for vehicles, health for vehicles, special ability changes depending on the class you're talking about. Very significant advantages. And the entire matchmaking system is also broken, so you do end up actually in a lot of situations as a player. If you're low level, you end up in a lot of situations with people that have a lot of the higher level star cards. So it's completely broken, completely imbalanced, badly designed, and it was designed as a pay-to-win system. Look, the idea of having a loot box system is fine, but EA just had to be greedy bastards and try and milk people for as much money as possible. That is the problem with Battlefront 2. That's why it's got such a controversy. And now, certainly, Electronic Arts has removed it for a moment, and they're probably going to have to make a complete overhaul if they're going to add it again. There's some karmic justice with them being forced to remove it because of the controversy, with Disney forcing them to remove it, apparently. But really, they shouldn't have done this. It's badly designed. And, I think a lot of people have looked at Overwatch and said, well, that's a successful system, but we could probably get more money than they do, right? That's just how this whole thing feels to me. That they looked at that and decided we're going to try and milk it for all it's worth. Well, thanks, EA. You might have just shot yourself, not in the foot, but in the head with this. Their stock market value has gone down. There's politicians talking about it. The Belgian government wants to ban them across the European Union. They might have screwed themselves a lot, very hard on this. And it's a shame because Electronic Arts had actually spent some time trying to rebuild their shattered reputation after it had been named the worst company in America for, 2 years in a row, not too long ago. And they did. And Battlefield 1 is a good game. they released a number of good titles, or titles that were at least acceptable to people. And now this year, what have they released? Mass Effect Andromeda and Battlefront 2, with a lot of controversy surrounding both of these titles. Like, I think BioWare is just one title away from being completely shut down as a company, and DICE, well, DICE is probably in hot water right now. I mean, mind you, they still have made a significant amount of profit over this, so I wouldn't worry too much about DICE. I would worry about BioWare, though. Costin here on Serious Gaming, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for more, and if you like my content, please do consider supporting me via PayPal